Angel fans, we're continuing our roster recap, and we're looking at third base. Oh, so fun, right? So what sort of season does Anthony Rendon have in store for us? What can we expect from him? And if he plays like we know he can play, will all be forgiven? I'm going to ask John that question. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you want to give back to the Super Halo Bros for all the Super Halo content, here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On Everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation. And today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
Happy Friday to you, and thank you for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Hey, in case you didn't know, we're back to 5 days a week, and we've been doing our roster recap every day this week. So if you're interested in seeing who the Angels have at each position and the depth beyond that, we've got that covered for you. And we're continuing that conversation on today's show with third base. Mike, we're going to tell you why this position is the most frustrating, but also the most important position for the Halos this season. Mike, we got to talk about it. We got to talk about Anthony Rendon. So let's get into it.
Yeah, his story is not unfamiliar to Angel fans, especially everydayers who have been watching these Angels for a really long time. He signed in 2020, 7-year deal, $245 million. Story is that Epler was going to visit somebody else, and it was a pitcher. And then he was called and told to come back and talk to Rendon and to sign him. And some guy named Artie told him to do that.
Zach
Wheeler, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Zach Wheeler.
It was Zach Wheeler who ended up pitching really well for the Phillies and still pitching really well for the Phillies. But we won't talk about that. Rendon hasn't performed, and that's an understatement, hasn't performed to the level of his contract outside of his first year. Now, 2020 was the COVID year, but John, he looked like the Anthony Rendon of years past, played in 52 of the 60 games. 286 batting average, 418 on base, 497 slugging, and a 915 OPS with a 150 OPS plus.
Woo!
Wow. 9 home runs, 31 RBIs, and that season would be the second most games he's played as an Angel in an Angel uniform.
By the way, he was top 10 in MVP voting.
He was
in 2020 that season as well.
You're
right, though. Since then, he's played 58 games in 2021, 47 in 2022, and 43 in 2023. Not only that, Mike, but Rendon hasn't hit like he did prior to coming to the Angels other than that 2020 season. Listen to this. In 2019, when the Nationals won the World Series, Rendon was a big part of that. He hit 319 batting average, 412 on base, Mike, a 598 slugging percentage.
Dang.
Where, keep in mind, 500 is like elite.
Yeah.
So for him to be 598
right,
and a 1,010 OPS with 34 home runs, 126 RBIs, and 44 doubles, which led the league that season. But outside of 2020, he hasn't seen his average get higher than 240, which was in 2021. Plus his power has dropped. He had 6 home runs and 13 doubles in 58 games in 2021. 5 home runs and 10 doubles in 22, 2 home runs and 6 doubles in 2023. Mike, what the heck happened?
Good question. A lot happened. I'm sure injuries played a part. Here's one thing that I noticed, John. Rendon's BABIP, that's batting average for balls in play. It's been over 300 his entire career, even 2020, up until 2020. So when he's making contact, that ball is finding a way to get through. After that year, it drops over 40 points to 267 in 21, 258 in 22, and to 268 in 2023. So when you look at all the numbers, it's really only the BABIP that has changed for Rendon. If you get really deep, get on FanGraphs and you nerd out like John and I do, everything else has been pretty similar, John. So
Yeah.
him making contact and it finding a hole happened a lot, even this first season with the Angels, but hasn't happened since. Everything else has been the same. And so it may just be that his body's breaking down. It may just be that he's getting a bit older. It may just be that he's a 34-year-old guy that is just living the 34-year-old life, right?
Right. Yeah, I can speak to that, being 35 now. Defensively, Mike, Rendon has fallen off as well. His ultimate zone rating, which kind of compiles the range and the arm and the ability to make the play. Every year with Washington, his ultimate zone rating was a positive at third base, except for his very first season, which is understandable. That was way back in 2013. He even posted a 12.1 ultimate zone rating in 2017 at third base with the Nationals. Since joining the Angels, his best ultimate zone rating, again, 2020, was 2.9. But since then, he hasn't had a positive ultimate zone rating. His best season was a negative 0.2. So question for you, how much of this is because of the injuries? How much of this is Rendon's posture toward playing baseball? What do you think?
That's an interesting question. I think a lot of it has to do with injuries. I just don't know, John, if we're playing up that, man, it just doesn't seem like he really wants to play baseball card a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that has an impact, but I do think that
well, it feels like he's never wanted to play baseball, like even with the Nationals.
Yes. And that's the point I want to make. Like, it feels like that's just kind of been him. And I know that has an impact in your mindset. I know it has an impact when you get out there, but I think that he's somebody who has just kind of got a meh perspective when it comes to baseball, even though he's been really, really good at it. So I would guess that it's maybe more injuries than anything else. Would you agree, disagree? Any other thoughts there?
The way I look at it is this. I know he had the hip issues in 2021. He had to have surgery for that. That's everything when you're a third baseman. And don't get me wrong, like he will still make the crazy play over the shoulder in foul territory and whatnot. Like he does pretty good over there, but then we complained about his lackadaisical, like sidearm throw over first base, which cost a ton of errors for the Angels last season. And he had a wrist issue in 2022. So between your base, where your hips are hurting and needing surgery in 21, that makes sense. For him to, with the wrist and everything, have issues with that also makes sense. And I think your hips and your wrist play into how you hit at the plate, which I think is another issue that we need to talk about, is the fact that those injuries certainly play into how he's going to perform when he's swinging the bat and when he's up to the dish.
Yeah. So, John, I'm going to ask you a stats question, and then I'm going to ask you a personal question. First, here's the stats question. FanGraphs projects that Rendon will play in 130 games, and here's his slash line: 259, 356 on base, 418 slugging, with an over 700 OPS. So, are you going to take the over or the under on 130 games?
I'm going to take the under.
Okay.
On 130 games. I have to imagine that he's going to have some time on the injured list. And even with 32 days off over the course of a season, and maybe some of those 32 days is a stint on the IL, but I'd say, 120 maybe is the maximum. I think 130 is a bit of a reach for Rendon. And I think they're going to be careful with him. So the one thing I will say about those projections, Mike, I imagine the slugging will be closer to 500. Again, like 300 average, 400 on base, 500 slugging is like where you would want to see somebody in terms of like, that's fantastic, right? The way you feel about a 300 average is how you should feel about a 500 slugging percentage. So to me, even if the average isn't that great, I could see the on base, especially with the walks that Rendon takes. He is good at working walks.
Yes, he does.
We can't take that away from him. So I think his on base would be higher than 356. I think even the slugging would be a little bit higher than 418. Maybe not 500 levels, but I could see it being over 418.
Okay, so let me add a quick question in there. 120 some odd games, you said. How many of those games, like percentage of those games, do you think that he's at third versus DH?
I would say he's probably like 65 at third base and 35 at DH, because remember, the DH has to go around to a lot of guys in this situation. And so it's not going to be constantly Rendon over there. But the fact is, right now they need him at third.
Yeah.
And the viable options behind him are Rengifo and Stefanic. And those are not guys that you want to run out there playing third every day, I should say. I would like to see Rengifo get in the lineup more. But to all of that said, you need Anthony Rendon over at third, and you need him to be good at third base.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of being good,
here it comes.
Here comes the question. Here comes the question, John. Been trying to get down to the heart of the matter, and I've been thinking about forgiveness, right? And so here's the question.
All right, Don. Well done, Don Henley.
Here's the question. If Rendon plays like we know he can, and he has let's say he has this slash line that we just talked about. Let's say that he has a pretty decent season. Is all forgiven? Are Angel fans Rendon fans again?
I think it's going to certainly help their case. But Mike, I was thinking about this before because I knew we were going to have this conversation. You and I had been like ardent supporters of Anthony Rendon in 21 and 22. And we said, look, the guy's hurt. Like, you can't blame him. Like, good grief, man. Like, the guy gets hurt and fouls off his shin. Like, you can't help that stuff. And so I thought people were being a little harsh on Rendon. But then he starts the season getting into it with the fan and grabbing him by the collar.
Right.
He's avoiding the media. He's, distant in the clubhouse and saying ridiculous things and behaving in ridiculous ways. And to me, that's where he lost me. And I think he lost you there as well. To the point where it's like, okay, I don't want to defend this guy anymore. Having said that, so please, everydayers, listen, that's where I stand on this issue.
Yeah.
Having said that, if I want to think about it from another perspective, I think Rendon's attitude is indicative of the Angels' problems as a whole. Because when you're in a job and you're in a crappy situation where you're hurt and you can't do what you're supposed to do, like Rendon's situation is he's hurt, he can't play, he can't do what he's supposed to do, right? If you take that and apply it to like the regular workforce where perhaps you're not able to do all the things that you need to be doing at your job and the situation sucks and your boss isn't that great and your team manager is not that great and is losing control of it. Like, to me, it's now, if I think about it that way, Rendon's behavior isn't that shocking. In fact, maybe he's doing what a lot of us would do. And maybe he's behaving the way a lot of us would do. Having said all that, I understand he's making way more money than any of us. Yeah. So, like, get your butt out there and play, dude, or change your attitude, right? So, in my opinion, Mike, if Rendon has a better season, I think that things will be forgiven by Angel fans. But I also think it's because the situation is better and it's worth playing for and it's worth fighting for because you have Ron Washington, who's an expert. You have the coaching staff around Ron Washington who are experts. Like, these are guys you want to work with and you care about. Look, the way we pile on, and I've seen the pile on for Phil Nevin over last season. I've seen the pile on for Matt Wise and Marcus Timms. The way you guys feel about the coaching staff from 2023 is probably the same way Rendon felt about the coaching staff from 2023. So to me, it's like, what's the reason? Why am I here? What am I doing? Like, I totally get that. And again, I understand he's making way more money than us.
Sure.
So
there are some things,
the caveat for my
there
whole
are some caveats,
spiel.
but you make a really good point. And so it'd be interesting to hear what he has to say this year, because can I say this? Out of the wellspring of the Angels' heart, Rendon speaks, right? And so we'll see if this team is healthy or not, depending on what we hear from Anthony Rendon. And I think that what we hear will give Angel fans the opportunity to say, hey, he's kind of winning me over because he's playing and he's got a different attitude, or no, he's the same guy and maybe we need to be done with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to, you remember that you talked about the Jack Vita show, or he was on the Jack Vita show, and there was that clip of him saying the year's got to be shorter and whatnot. That, to me, I felt like he said it in the context of like kind of kidding around, and that's how I received it. But at the same time, coming from him,
he's not the spokesperson for that. Sure.
No, right. He should not be the face of that. That's like, here's this alcoholic who's the face of Budweiser. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
probably not the best connection there, right? Hey, we want to thank you for making Locked On Angels your first listen every single day. And if you're still here after my Anthony Rendon rant, I appreciate you. And get in the comments and yell at me, or get in the comments and tell me how you feel. And maybe I made a good point. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. But get in the comments on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. Coming up on Locked On Angels, what happens after Anthony Rendon? Who do the Angels turn to in terms of the bench and in terms of the minor leagues? We're going to get into all of that coming right up.
Well, if you are a listener or viewer and you're outside of the Southern California area, you may not know, but it's been raining here for like consecutive days, and we're finally getting some sunshine. But
Seriously.
it feels like we got to build an ark, and we gotta we gotta go float somewhere because
2 by
it's been
2,
raining.
baby.
And it typically doesn't happen in SoCal. But I do like the rain and I do like the cold, Johnny, because that means that it's soup season. Soup season, rainy, cold, need a fire, soup season, right? And if you are in soup season, wherever you're at, make sure that you get all the ingredients that you need to master your recipe while getting cash back on your purchases by using Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys. Toys? When was the last time you bought toys, John? I want to get some toys. The average user...
I'm not going to say, actually.
For the kids. The average user for Ibotta earns about $145 a year, which is great. That could cover the cost of a shopping trip, a flight maybe, or a fancy dinner you've been craving, and then you go out and buy toys. Other apps give you points, but they don't amount to too much. But with Ibotta, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can use in your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards, and join the over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you go shopping from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. So right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying it out by using this code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. So download the free Ibotta app right now and use our code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Stores, and use our code LOCKEDONMLB.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Locked On Everydayers. Don't forget to head on over to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, the first ever 24/7 national sports streaming channel. You get insight and analysis from the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows 24/7. So just turn that on, leave it on in the background, and you can catch up on all the top stories of the sports world of the day. So head on over to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and hit subscribe to the first ever 24/7 national sports streaming channel.
You've heard me say it once, and I'm going to say it again. John already mentioned their names on the show. The backups for this team are going to be guys that are going to be stretched a bit because they're going to have to play multiple positions. And the two names that we've talked about ad nauseum for this last week, as we talked about the infield, are Luis Rengifo and Michael Stefanic. Those are going to be the guys that are going to be the backups. They're going to be the guys that are going to have to play third. I would guess, John, that we'll probably see Rengifo more at third than anywhere else on the infield.
Yeah,
because I could see him needing the at-bats. And then if he's not playing third and Rendon is DHing or he's hurt or just not playing that day, then I could see Stefanic at third and maybe Rengifo at short backing up Neto, or maybe at second base and Drury shifts over to first. There's a lot of options. There is a lot of flexibility. That is a really good thing. But Rengifo, Johnny, has the most experience at third. He played 39 games there in 2022, 23 games there last year in 2023. And of course, Stefanic played third for the first time in the majors. He got into 8 games. And we talked about this earlier this week. Stefanic at third base, and he had that like line drive to third and made a great defensive stop. Yeah. It seems like he's somebody that really steps up to the plate. He's not gonna be flashy with his defense, but it does seem like he's somebody that can handle the position really
boring,
well.
Fundamental baseball.
What we need, right? Now, Stefanic in the minors played 86 games at third base in 2018, and that's it. That's all that he played. So he hasn't played there since then. And then last year, major league level, Phil Nevin's like, bro, can you play third for me? And he stepped up into 8 of those games. So, Johnny, will Rengifo be relied upon to fill all of the backup roles in the infield? And will Stefanic get opportunities where Rengifo isn't playing?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the Stefanic part. You need a Michael Stefanic because he's going to play second and he's going to play third base. And I think those are the more pressing needs. I understand we have Drury, then Rengifo at second. But like we talked about during our second base show, or maybe it was our first base show, but if you need somebody to take the place of Nolan Shawnuel at first because you have a lefty on the mound, you slide Drury over to first, you put Rengifo at second because he's better hitting lefties as a switch hitter, then perhaps, if Anthony Rendon is DHing, then you're going to see Stefanic over there at third base in that situation because you've got Rengifo over at second. I don't know that they will stack that many moves up in one day or like a single start. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe in that situation, you do have Rendon play third rather than putting him at DH and bringing in Stefanic. But at the same time, I think Stefanic is going to find a lot of time at third base, especially later in the game, maybe after Anthony Rendon's last at bat, where you just need him to go for 2 or 3 innings. I think that he's perfectly capable. I'm glad that he's shown that he's capable, and you weren't holding your breath every time the ball went over to Stefanic at third base like you were with Rendon last year. Rengifo's a little bit different for me because he's not a fantastic third baseman according to his underlying metrics. And so to me, he seems like the guy who will get the first opportunity to play in Rendon's stead over at third base. At the same time, it makes me a little bit nervous. We did talk about this yesterday on the shortstop episode where Rengifo is a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Yeah.
And we'd like to see him get some reps down in spring training in the areas that he needs those reps the most, because we know that he can play a decent second. We know that he can be pretty good at shortstop, but third base, I think, is a big question mark. And so is shortstop, to be honest. But all of that to say, we need to see Rengifo get those reps over there in Tempe when they head down there for spring training this season.
This is why I'm nervous about third base, Sean. And I'm nervous because Rendon not being in there, there's a lot of like, who do we put there, right? And yeah, sure, we could put Rengifo there, no problem. But because of his questionable defense, you're not sure what you're getting. And we've mentioned this multiple times on this pod during this week. This starting staff, and we'll preview them next week, this starting staff needs a good defense behind them. And this starting staff needs to be able to rely on the third baseman and the shortstop and the second baseman. That up to middle defense is important, but also the hot corner is really, really important. You need somebody that's going to make all the stops and play the boring, fundamental baseball. And so it might be interesting to see Michael Stefanic over there. I actually am of the opinion that we'll probably see him more at third than maybe Rengifo, because Rengifo will need to play other positions, and Stefanic and Rendon can switch in and out. And why not? Stefanic's got a great bat. We've talked about him being somebody that can come off the bench and make contact, right? And that's what you need from somebody like a Michael Stefanic. And so I would be okay with him being more the backup for third, and then having Rengifo be a bit of a flexible guy between shortstop and second base, right?
I wonder if Stefanic is getting more time at third base, is it like replacing Rendon in the middle of the game, or kind of what I alluded to earlier, if Rendon's DHing, are you okay with putting Stefanic in there more often than Rengifo?
I think so. And I would, again, try it, like I said, with Rengifo on, I believe, yesterday's show. I would want Stefanic to be in those scenarios in spring training. I would throw every situation at him in the first 15 games of spring training. What can you do with this? What can you do with that? Yeah. Because I think he needs to be somebody that they can rely upon and have him come in, because Rendon is not going to be somebody, as you mentioned, that's going to be playing 140, 150 games at just third base. He's going to be the DH. He's going to be on the IL. He's not maybe going to be around that often. We just don't know based on his history.
The bottom line here is that Rendon needs to go above and beyond in 2024, play 162 games, surprise us all, Rendon, so we don't have to be in this situation when the season starts.
We're just a couple of days away from the Super Bowl, so happy Super Bowl to all those who celebrate. And that's from our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is about finding the best seats, grabbing your favorite snacks, and maybe even for you, placing some bets. You can get a W, whether your team wins or loses. You could win this weekend, and you can bet on Super Bowl 58 in all different kinds of ways. Who's going to score a touchdown, how many points will be scored. They even flip the coin and let you bet on like heads or tails, who's going to win that, what side they're going to select. All that stuff is great. FanDuel's here to help you out. New customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL.
And today's show is brought to you by our friends at Logix Credit Union. The best lineup in LA right now is the lineup of auto loans at Logix. They start off the top with our personal favorites, the proven and dependable new and used vehicle loans. You can count on these guys to give you low rates and save you big time bucks. Next up, they've got an exciting new rookie sensation in their electric vehicle loans with super low rates and flexible payment terms. Rounding out their lineup, they've got the auto refinancing loans and lease buyout loans. With these guys, you can lower your monthly payment and get on the road to owning your car much faster. Seriously, nobody can beat the lineup at Logix. So visit your local Logix branch right here in the LA area and let one of their amazing team members help you, or just apply online in minutes at logixbanking.com/car. That's LOGIX banking.com/car. Logix is a proud sponsor of For the Troops. For more information on the upcoming For the Troops Gala, visit www.forthetroops.org/event for more information.
Well, outside of Rendon and Rengifo and Stefanic, who else is available if the Angels have to go to an emergency guy? One of the pieces that the Angels signed this season is Hunter Dozier, 32-year-old veteran, signed as a free agent in January. He's played third. He's played first. He can kind of play the infield, a lot of different spots, has some pop, can play pretty decent. Not going to be somebody that's going to razzle you or dazzle you. He would have to be added to the 40-man roster if they wanted to bring him up. But Johnny, what I really want to talk about in this segment, though, is I'm of the opinion that third base for the Angels is the most important, because anytime that the Angels have been successful, they've had a really good third baseman. Yeah. And two of the specific times we can think about is early 2000s with Troy Glaus and then later 2000s with Sean Figgins. Both of those guys were catalysts for this team. One in the middle of the lineup, one at the top of the lineup, and they played really great defense too.
I'd even say David Freese coming over in the 2014 season was a big part in helping the Angels get to the playoffs that year.
Yeah. So that's my conviction. Again, it's just eye test, but when the Angels have had a really good third baseman, this team has been really good. And I think that they need somebody at the hot corner that can play good defense, but also be a good piece, a contributing piece to this starting lineup, and somebody that's not going to be a headache, somebody that's not going to get in the way, right? And I know that feels complicated with Rendon, but if he can turn things around this year, if he can have a decent season, I will be excited about that, right? Yeah. And I think my gut tells me that your point that you made a couple of segments ago, I think the culture is different with Ron Washington, especially with Bo Porter, who is good friends with Rendon. I think the culture is much different. And I think that Rendon's going to come into this season with a different posture and a different perspective. That's an assumption. I don't know him. I don't have any like insider information. I just think that it would be wise if he's a smart guy and really wants to change the narrative. Then I think he walks into this season keeping it quiet, answering the questions that he needs to answer, and then playing within himself, playing the game that he is good at and not trying to be more than that. And I think not having like Shohei Ohtani on this team might be helpful for him, because there isn't going to be this media circus that will notice him being kind of weird and not talking to the media. Right. And so I think that there's a lot of boxes I would check that would say these are benefits for Anthony Rendon. But I think the biggest box is that Bo Porter's here, but more specifically, Ron Washington's here, and it's going to change the culture. So again, of the opinion, third base matters to the Angels. What do you think?
I agree with you because in the years between Sean Figgins and David Freese, you had Alberto Callaspo, and not necessarily a true third baseman. He was kind of that utility guy that Rengifo has been the last few years. And then it wasn't until they got David Freese that they were able to get to the playoffs again. And I know it wasn't Cardinals David Freese, but it was still a really good David Freese that year. And since then they've had, Escobar over there, and Escobar was decent, but I'm with you, Mike. When the time came to sign Anthony Rendon, and obviously we would have much preferred Zach Wheeler, and the Angels' trajectory might have been completely different with Zach Wheeler leading this rotation at the time. Can you imagine him and Ohtani in the same rotation, and then the young guys behind them? Like, it changes the face of that entire rotation for the years that they had them. And it bothers me that we have just, how do I say this? The Angels could have used Rendon in that time. And so signing him, especially the kind of guy he had been in his career, was a good move. I know it was an Artie move. I know it wasn't Garrett Cole, and I know it wasn't Zach Wheeler, but the Angels, I still think, needed a third baseman when they signed him prior to 2020. And you get a taste of that in the 60-game sprint that was 2020. And since then, he's been hurt. He's had issues every single season. And you almost wonder, like, I know that sometimes you get injured and things just happen. But if it's not his hips, then it's his wrists. And then is it something else this year? Like, it was the shin bone and this year, and falling off that ball off of his shin, like, kept him out for that long. It's like, what's it going to be this year?
Right.
And I think that's the frustrating part is you look at the track record of Anthony Rendon and what he was able to do for the Nationals and how well he did it for so long. And then you get 2020 and you get like a taste of what Rendon can bring to the table. And then you just have all these injury issues. And then on top of that, the attitude issues. It's just really frustrating. So I hope that you're right. I hope that the culture changes with Ron Washington. A lot of people, a lot of Angel fans, and a lot of everydayers said that if Ron Washington comes in and manages this team, he might be the only guy to get Rendon out of his funk. And if that can't happen, then I don't think it's a Ron Washington problem. I think it's just an Anthony Rendon problem. I think if he doesn't get out of his funk or change his attitude, then he is who he is. Because I think the rest of these guys are excited to play for Ron Washington. I think the rest of these guys are excited to get into 2024. So if we don't see a change, then Rendon is who he is. Now, having said all that, I think that beyond Rengifo and Stefanic, and I know we didn't talk about Dozier for the first base episode because he will likely be somebody at third base, a capable minor league guy who signed a minor league deal and who has been there before. And we've iterated this all week long. When you have somebody that needs to be your backup to the backup, you want it to be somebody who's been there before at the major league level. Don't take chances on guys who are risky. Don't take chances on guys who, well, they could be potentially good. Like you always say it, Mike, performance over potential.
Yeah.
And Hunter Dozier, he's not going to light the world on fire with his bat, but we know that his performance is there because he's done it before. And we're not expecting any potential from Hunter Dozier. He is who he is.
Yeah.
And so if the Angels have to get to that level, I think it's important to remember that having these minor league guys who have been there before, I think that's a really important thing for the Angels this season.
Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Now, check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. It's the first ever 24/7 streaming channel covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, hit subscribe, and be a part of the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel.
Hey, we appreciate you being here today. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Angels and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. It's the weekend, Mike, and we're going to be back here on Monday after Super Bowl Sunday. We're either going to be really happy or really sad, so bear with us on Monday, everybody. Mike, what do we have on deck for Monday's show?
Well, we're going to go to the outfield, from the infield to the outfield. We're going to talk about left field and center field and right field. We're going to talk about Taylor Ward and if he's going to be ready to go. Will Trout play in center the whole season? And what about Aaron Hicks? Where does he fit in? And, of course, Joe Adell. What does that mean for Joe Adell? And we can't forget about everyone's favorite Mickey Moniak, what to do with him as well. Lots to discuss. We're going to talk about it on Monday on Locked On Angels.
Looking forward to that. We hope you'll come back and join us on Monday. Don't think that for 1 second I'm not going to tweet the baseball season as soon as the Super Bowl is over. I'm definitely doing that. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us, everybody, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
Baseball season.
That's right. That's right. Go Niners. It's our last chance, Mike. Go Niners.
Let's go. Brock Purdy.